I'm up here today with my 1963 Schwinn Typhoon. We'll be covering some speedometer basics today. I've had a couple of people ask me what's the correct speedometer for my vintage bike, and there's no real straightforward answer on that. It's all going to depend on what particular bike you have, but I can run through some of the basics here, give some people who have no idea a better understanding of what they are looking for, what they want to do here. You have a couple of different options for speedometers. You can basically run any style. Well, let's break it down first. You have three components of a speedometer. You have your speedometer head, or the gauge, you have your speedometer cable, and you have your speedometer drive unit. You can basically run any head you want on any bicycle. Just so long as you have the proper cable and drive that will work with that bike, the head up here really doesn't matter. You can run anything from a Huffy head to on a Schwinn to a Schwinn head on a Huffy. It really doesn't matter. But what really does matter is that you have the proper size drive unit for the wheel, so that we have the correct ratio running through the cable, so you get the correct readout on your gauge. Schwinn speedometers mount one of two ways. This is a stem mounted bracket. As you can see, it goes underneath the stem bolt in the center there. They also have handlebar mounted brackets. I basically have a speedometer for every bike I own here. And here would be a handlebar bracket. You can see that it just goes around the handlebar there and holds it in place. As far as Schwinn speedometers, all these older metal case Schwinn speedometers are all manufactured as a Schwinn approved component through the Herit company. These Herit speedometers are exactly the same as a Schwinn speedometer, though they may look a little different on the outside. They're the same unit on the inside. When I put two of them side by side, you'll note that there's a little pin there and a pin there, a pin there and a pin there. On the left and right of both entry holes, you'll see those stopper pins. Those are what keeps the unit in there from turning while you use it. And you can essentially take the guts out of either of these and swap them into either case. The case is just the case. The unit itself within is identical between the two. These metal case Schwinn speedometers versus the plastic one we saw in there has a smaller output shaft here. When we look at these two side by side here, this department store unit actually has the same output shaft as that plastic Schwinn speedometer on my Typhoon. You'll see that it's a little bit larger diameter output shaft here than this output shaft here. And when we put the cables side by side, you can really then see the difference there between the smaller shaft for the metal unit and the larger coupler there for the plastic units. These speedometer cables here for the Schwinn units have a square drive at each end that has an inner and outer cable. The inner cables have been known to break over time. I mean, if you got a unit that starts getting real gummed up, it'll jam and then it'll break your cable. These guys here, they essentially have two main different styles of speedometer drives. You have your metal drive unit with a separate cable, and you have your Stewart Warner drive here. And this one also has a separate cable, but the one on my Typhoon has a drive cable combo in that they do not separate at this joint. There is no joint there. As you'll see here, they are one piece. There is no separation there. You're going to want a drive that corresponds with your wheel size on your bicycle. Every drive is stamped as to what size it is. For instance, this one here is really dirty, but it's a 20-inch. This one here is a 26. That one's a 27. Though they all look the same, they're stamped for their size, for the size of wheel. And the difference between them is the ratio of the worm gear inside this casing. Now, when you install a speedometer, there's one main thing to keep in mind. these older Schwinn speedometers all have a 3/8 axle hole, so that way they'll fit 3/8 axles. Well, the majority of vintage Schwinns actually have a 5/16 axle. So if you're buying an older unit like this and you have a 5/16 axle, you're going to need to make sure that it comes with the bushing required for that. Because if you don't have the bushing, what you're going to have is a sloppy drive unit that doesn't fit properly. And it makes sense why they did that, so that way it's going to fit all axles regardless. But it can be quite frustrating when you lose a tiny little bushing. See, this one has a bushing in it, and you can just barely make out that it has a silver bushing in there. So bushing is critical if you're... Here's a better example. It's actually out of this one. You can see this is the bushing. It's just a thin little washer that fits exactly in the hole and converts that hole from 3/8 to 5/16, so that way it's not sloppy on your axle. When you install your drive unit on your axle, you put your drive unit on there, you're going to want to give it a spin. You know, hold your axle between your fingers, which I can't do because I'm holding the camera at the moment. You're going to want to watch which way your output shaft is spinning, because that absolutely has to be spinning clockwise, or otherwise it won't lift the needle off the pin in the speedometer for a correct readout. Because if this is spinning your cable counterclockwise, well, essentially you're spinning your speedometer backwards, and it's trying to push the needle against the pin. You can install your speedometer on either side of the handlebar you like, whether you prefer it on the left or you prefer it on the right, which is why they have an output at each end. And you can just take this cap off and it's threaded just the same as it is on the other end. You just got to make sure that you're having that output turning the right way. I think that pretty much covers the basics of it for the most part. Good luck and ride on.